I always say it's like a labor of love. You're like sweating in the kitchen and I'm like, these tomatoes will be so good. Like as I'm stirring the pot of tomatoes.
Hello, my friends, and welcome to the Seeds and Weeds podcast. Are you a gardener, a forager, an herbalist? Maybe you're just a little plant curious? You've come to the right place. This is Seeds and Weeds. Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. Today's episode is all about tomatoes. We're going to be talking about all of our favorite different types of tomatoes, some of our favorite varieties. We've got an expert stepping in to talk to us a little bit about growing tomatoes, some tips to help us succeed in the garden, overcome some of the more common challenges that we might face. We're going to share some recipes and ideas for ways to use tomatoes. We're going to talk about seed-saving tomatoes. This is everything tomato. We could say totally tomatoes. That's what's happening here on the podcast today. But before we dig into it, Heather's here, of course, and she's going to share with us what is new at Small House Farm.
Hey, friends. We just recently came back from the Seed Savers Exchange Conference. We had talked about that on the last episode of that we were going to be going. Well, we have returned, and it was full of inspirational and enlightening seed saving and gardening content.
Oh my gosh, it was so much fun. It was so cool to see all the people again. You know, we hadn't been there. Elijah and I went in 2019, so that was the last time that we were there. And it was so much fun just to see everybody. John Kuykendall was there with his family, and Michael Washburn and
Bill
John
Best.
Sherman. Bill Best. Oh my gosh, Bill and Michael Best were there. Yeah, so it was just really cool. I mean, Diane Wheely, like, of course, all the who's of the seed world for sure. So super, super duper fun.
We sat in and listened to a corn hand pollination workshop, which was really cool. And it's something we kind of already knew about, but to watch and listen to someone else describe it and explain some more details about it was really cool. We spent a lot of time in the gardens. They have a couple demonstration gardens, and I personally spent a lot of time taking photos and really looking at the stuff closely, and that was really fun.
Yeah, it was super cool. And then, I mean, as usual, Heather, she's she's so talented when it comes to finding great places to stay, finding lodging. So she found us a really cool Airbnb there in Iowa that was just totally awesome.
Oh my gosh, we had our own waterfall, literally our own personal waterfall. This was it's kind of like an Airbnb, but you rented the RV at someone's property, and on their property, there was a cave with a spring-fed waterfall that was basically all ours.
It was so nice, too, because it had gotten really hot, of course, while we were there. And, I mean, the waterfall, the air just blowing out of the cave was 10 degrees cooler than anywhere else. So it was just so refreshing to come back from Heritage Farm and then just go jump in this waterfall or sit there and it was so refreshing. It was really, really awesome.
Yeah, it was really cool. And the drive to Iowa through Wisconsin and Minnesota was beautiful. So it really was a really fun vacation.
It was super awesome. I also want to share a kayak update. You may remember a couple episodes ago, we shared with you our goal to kayak 50 miles this year. And we said we'd give you updates. So we're giving you updates. We are not quite to 50 yet, but we are very close. Heather, what are you at, 46?
Yeah, 47, I think. And we still have a couple months left to go. So we'll easily be able to hit 50. And I'm excited to see what number we're going to actually get to.
Absolutely.
But the kids are back to school and we're kind of getting back to our routines. And it's going to take a couple weeks to get there. But it feels good to have the kids back and us back to work.
Yeah. You know, having more time to get into things and get out in the garden and do stuff. I got more. It's fall's coming, so I've got dates on the calendar again. So I'm getting back on the road again soon. I've already done a couple programs, and that's going to just start ramping up as we move into the next month. So that's going to be busy. And, you know, even though it's summer, we're obviously thinking about autumn already. That's happening with the seed saving and all these types of things. It has us looking forward into the future. And that means Heather's been busy working on the autumn Patreon boxes. And that's pretty cool to see it come together. You know, she's been working hard on it. As always, it's almost like a nonstop full-time job doing these boxes anymore. There's so many members in the Patreon. It's incredible. And so that's going to transition me right into the Patreon shout outs for our newest members. These are folks that have joined just since the last episode. And it's quite a list. So let's just get right into this. Okay, ready? So this is a big special thanks to all the newest members of our Patreon community. Kay Kent, Pam, Lydia, Kim, Shorty, Sherry, Patricia, Sandy Ingram, Marlene Carley, Laura Rodriguez, Ruth, Carol Weiss, Virginia, and Rebecca Lee. Again, quite a list. Thank you all so much for being a part of our Patreon community. We love having you. We appreciate your support. Many of the things that we do here at Small House Farm would not be possible without the support of our Patreon community. So we're so thankful to all of you for being a member. For some of you have been there for years now at this point, and that's just really awesome. For those of you that are new and you're interested in learning maybe more about it, obviously there's a link to our Patreon in the show notes of this episode, or you could go right to our website, seedsandweedspodcast.com. You'll find it. Check it out. And it's like, I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but there's a lot of benefits to being a member of our community. Everyone benefits. You benefit. We benefit. Everyone wins. So check it out.
All right, let's dive into those terrific tomatoes.
Terrific tomatoes. Well, it's summertime. So to me, summer garden equals tomato. There's nothing better than that homegrown tomato right out of your garden. There's nothing compares to it. In the past seasons of the podcast, we used to do a segment called 5 Questions, where the guests would come on the show and I'd ask them 5 questions. And one of the questions I would always ask is, what's your favorite plant? What's your favorite plant family? What's your favorite thing to grow? Some variation of that. I heard a lot of different answers throughout those segments, but the one that kept coming up the most common one, tomatoes. Everybody loves tomatoes.
Tomatoes. I'm from Jersey.
We love tomatoes.
Getting a fresh tomato was special. I grow tons and I love them.
Eating a tomato fresh off the vine is one of the most wonderful experiences that you can have.
One of the things I think I love the most about tomatoes is the diversity. There's just so much diversity in the tomato. In one simple species, there are so many different options and choices. There's literally a tomato for every person. There's a tomato for every place. They come in all sorts of different shapes, sizes, colors. You've got your reds, orange, yellows, green when ripes. There's purple ones. There's stripy ones. There's bicolors. There's so much. It's absolutely incredible. And then the types of tomatoes are pretty variable too, right? We've got your little tiny cherry tomatoes, which are really nice for snacking on, or they're especially good for folks that maybe live in a shorter growing season too, because you can get a lot of cherry tomatoes pretty quickly. They come on pretty early and they'll ripen right up because they're a smaller fruit. Or the opposite of that big honking beefsteak slicer, putting on your sandwiches, your BLTs and that sort of thing. And then there's your canning tomatoes, like your paste varieties. And these might be the most utilitarian, right? Because they have less juice in them, less water. So there's more meat to this tomato. So they're perfect for making sauces and cooking down for canning and that sort of thing, because you don't have to cook it down nearly as long to get a nice thick sauce. They're built for that.
I love it when I cut a tomato open and it's just like all meat, and you know that you can just put it on a sandwich and it's not going to juice all over the place. Like, that is a lovely tomato.
Yeah, very few seeds in some of those too, which is nice, unless you're obviously saving seeds or selling seeds. Then you got to grow a lot more tomatoes to get a decent amount of seed, but totally worth it when you put it on that sandwich. Even a piece of white bread, tomato on there, not bad. So good. But there's even more diversity in tomatoes. So when we get to growing tomatoes, we're going to find that we have things called indeterminate and determinate tomatoes. So an indeterminate tomato will grow all the way up until the frost kills it. The plant will never stop. The vines will continue to grow, and it'll continue to try to put out tomatoes the entire season. The longer your season is, the longer this plant's going to live, the more tomatoes you're going to get. Pretty nice. The opposite of that, of course, is the determinate. And it's easy to remember this because a determinate tomato, you can determine how tall it's going to grow. Ooh. They have a set height.
Good trick to remember that.
Yeah, for sure. They have a set height, and they're only going to put out, basically one main harvest of tomatoes. So it's uniform. You can predict the production time. So a lot of commercial growers really lean into these determinate tomatoes. There's less trellising involved, less work with that, but they're going to be able to get lots and lots of tomatoes all at once. So often, when you're off a roadside stand or something, if you're buying bushels of tomatoes, more times than not, those are determinate tomatoes that those folks are growing,
But most of the tomatoes that we grow, and you are probably at home growing, are, I suppose, commonly the indeterminate.
Yeah, well, here at Small House, for sure. I prefer the indeterminate tomatoes. I don't mind, having the harvest spread out throughout the entire season. That's just more tomatoes to enjoy. And our scale is all right. I mean, we can grow quite a bit of tomato here, but it's still manageable to do all the trellising and everything that you need to have an indeterminate tomato. So yeah, for sure. Most home gardeners are probably growing indeterminate varieties. If you dig into like a seed catalog or anything like that, most of the tomatoes being offered are usually indeterminate, but there's certainly determinate ones out there, which are going to be good for growing in containers or growing on balconies or anything like that. But if you're growing on balconies, if you have limited space, one really cool thing that we consider is these, they call them micro tomatoes. And they're just little dinky things, these little tiny tomato plants. And some of them will even produce tomatoes, full size, regular size tomato on an inky dinky plant.
That seems wild.
Yeah, they're pretty wild for sure. They're pretty neat. And, so that's fun as a novelty just to grow them to see it because it's just unusual. But if you have a limited space or anything like that, I mean, these are a really cool option, these little tiny plants that you can grow.
Kind of like the dwarf fruit trees that you can buy,
sort of like that, or that Tom Thumb pea, that the garden pea just grows a little tiny plant, and so you could grow it like in a little pot, on your porch or something like that. Yeah, so you can still enjoy growing something nice and getting a good harvest, even if you have very limited space. And then there's, we can kind of think about wild tomatoes a little bit. Now, the
literal wild tomato, not like the micro that we just called wild, but but the original tomato and it being in the wild.
Sure. The pre-domestication, we could say to be more specific, right? So tomatoes originally come from like Central and South America, and the original fruits were very, very small, very sour, not very palatable, not the most enjoyable thing. But we have another species of tomatoes that we can encounter. All of these things that we've talked about up to this point are all one species. And that's what's so cool. So much diversity in one species. Solanum lycopersicum, right? Really neat. But then there's Solanum pimpinifolium, which is sort of like the step between here and the wild tomato plants. So they do have their smaller fruits and oodles of them. So many of them. I think the most well-known commercial variety that falls under the species is called Matt's Wild Cherry. And there's just lots of little tiny little red cherry tomatoes and like so many of them, so it's kind of fun. Just a little bit more diversity, something different going out there. So there's really, literally a tomato for everybody.
So we tried to then decide what our favorite tomato was, which was a really hard thing to sift through, honestly. We had a couple years of tomato tasting contests that we would do on YouTube with the family, and we would all taste tomatoes and decide which one was the winner for the year. And that was just within that year, within that season, which one won the ones that we were growing. But then when I was trying to decide what was our favorite tomato in the long term, this is a hard question.
It's impossible. It's impossible to say. So while we were working on ours, we reached out to other folks and started collecting information from other people about what their favorite tomatoes were too. And nobody anywhere ever could just pick one.
No,
I don't think it's possible.
Everybody always gave us a list, a couple, at least 2, 3, 4 different tomatoes, which obviously there's a tomato for each different reason you might want tomatoes. So it makes sense to have a couple favorites.
Sure, absolutely. So for us, if we had to narrow it down, if we were like forced to choose just the one tomato, we decided it would be Old Carolina. That's the one. And it kind of checks a lot of boxes for us. So it's an old tomato, and so it's got a really cool story, right? So that's a fun part of it. These were seeds that were given to us at a seed swap in Kentucky, and they belonged originally to a lady. Her name was Nell Bryson, and they were found in the back of her freezer, and they had been in this freezer for 65 years. So it's like this is. Just that alone puts this right up in the top 10 coolest tomatoes we've ever grown, because we got the seeds, we got 70% germination on them. They grew. Just that alone is very awesome. But then the tomato itself is incredible.
It was beautiful. It's a huge yellow, orangish, blush tomato. And it's, a perfect sandwich tomato, but it makes a great sauce tomato, and we've made salsas out of it, and we've froze it and canned it. We've done so many things with this tomato. It's really been a staple for us.
Yeah, for sure. And it's really fun to use fresh because, it is this bicolor like you're describing it. So when you cut it up or you dice it up for like salsas, it's really beautiful. It's very, very attractive, and it makes a really fun kind of yellowish sauce. So that's really unique. But they're big honking beefsteaks. So they're perfect for slicing and putting on a sandwich,
We do tell the story of this, of how we got that seed in Bevan's first book, From Our Seeds and Their Keepers.
Yeah, and it's an interesting thing about seed stories because this story has really evolved. In the book, it's really the first iteration of that seed story. We tell the story about how we got the seeds and we grew the seeds and all this sort of thing. And then since then, we've continued to try to explore more of the history of this tomato, and we were able to track down the family. And I got to talk to Nell Bryson's family on the phone. And so there's even more of that story as it continues to unfold. And now we're a part of that story, because you can look this tomato up online and other seed companies sell it now. And they even mention us by name, that we're the source of the seeds, so the story is just continually growing and stuff. And that's really fun. But over the years when we were doing those tomato tasting videos that you'd mentioned, it was always a different tomato that won, wasn't it?
Yeah. Well, large barred boar, which has been also a staple at Small House for many years, won a couple different times. But then we also had a cherry tomato win, Puerto Cortez. That was a unique winner that year. And then the last video, we had the Romanesco.
The Romanesco. Yeah. So let's nerd out a little bit about these varieties. So first, let's talk about that large barred boar, just briefly. It's another large, dark colored. It's umami, very wonderful flavor. It's from Brad Gates at Wild Boar Farms, hence the name, the large barred boar.
I love Brad.
Yep. So this is one of his tomatoes. The next year that we had, it was the Puerto Cortez cherry tomato. Now, this is seeds that were harvested off of plants on the side of the road in Ecuador. And then they eventually made their way to us through the Experimental Farm Network. Nate Kleinman, who had the seeds, who shared them with me at an event that we were both at one time. So that was a really fun one, super prolific and delicious, obviously, because it won the competition. The competition wasn't just based on flavor, there's color and texture and all these wonderful things. And that just happened to be the one. And then the last one that you mentioned, there's the Pantano Romanesco. So this is an old Italian variety, as the name implies, even from Rome. It's an old Roman tomato. And Pantano is describing the swampy marsh around Rome where these tomatoes used to grow. Now, what does that mean? I don't know. We didn't grow it in a swampy marsh here by any means. We grew it in a raised bed, and it did great for us. Obviously, so well, it was a winner in the competition. But those are three very distinctly different tomatoes. So even for us, from year to year, we're just drawn to something different. That's, again, the beauty of the tomato is there's so many different options, so much good stuff.
Definitely. And it's interesting to listen to you describe not only the history of the tomatoes, but the characteristics of the tomato. And when I was at the Seed Savers Exchange, when we were at the seed swap one of the days, which was really cool to attend, there was a guy next to me that had these tomato description sheets, and they were actually, it was a photocopy of something from the Seed Savers Exchange yearbook, right? Is that what that's? Yeah, the yearbook. It was a photocopy from years ago. I mean, he actually didn't even know when he had originally photocopied these descriptors, but it was like a sheet that you could look at and help you describe a tomato. Like, it had the different shapes of a tomato, and the flesh color, and the external color, and the skin color, and the fruit size, and the shoulders, and the blossom scar, and all sorts of like things that you could check and circle, so that when you were gonna either sell or describe your tomato later, that you remembered and knew all of these details.
Yeah, this is really cool. It's a lot of the more, you say, professional terminology, I guess. Like if we had a seed catalog and we were trying to describe varieties, this would be the terms that we'd use. It's got leaf type in here, potato leaf, irregular, dwarf variety. Look, there's even dwarf in this old sheet. You know what I mean? So
yeah, I think I really would like to remake this because it's kind of a rough photocopy now. And like I said, he seemed as though he possibly was photocopying the same photocopy for years. So I almost want to remake this and possibly have it on the website. So if you hop on our Patreon, that's probably where I'd put it.
Yeah, for sure. This is really, really cool. That was cool that you picked that up. When I'd mentioned that we'd asked around to other folks about what their favorite tomatoes were. And so I put the question out in the Seeds and Weeds, the Facebook group. And of course, nobody could pick one tomato. People said all sorts of stuff. A lot of people replied, and they all said a whole bunch of stuff, And so, I mean, so many different things, like all sorts of So they said things like Larry's Large Cherry, Green Zebra, Speckled Roman, Sergeant Pepper, Black Strawberry. I mean, there's all sorts of wild stuff. And it's fun because those are all so different colors and shapes and sizes, and, like really highlighting how unique the tomato can be and how eclectic the options are for us. So for every grower, you can really find a tomato that just fits your particular your niche of what you're interested in.
But we found a couple of tomatoes that were mentioned multiple times, like Cherokee Purple, San Marzano, Amish Paste. These tomatoes are more common in people's gardens. And there's a reason why they're more common, because they're really good tomatoes.
Oh, yeah, sure. Those were ones that came up multiple times. Mortgage Lifter, that was another one where a lot of people said that. And if you've grown any of those tomatoes before, you know that they're fantastic, right? Amish Paste. I mean, Cherokee Purple is probably one of the most famous tomatoes around. Everybody's growing Cherokee Purple anymore, right? So they're growing it for a reason. Because it's delicious. It's awesome. Grows well. Does well for people.
It's our first year growing Cherokee Purple, though.
Isn't that funny? Yeah, we're a little late to the game on that one. And we had so many people mention it when I reached, because this was in the spring when I asked people about this, and so many people mentioned it. I was like, well, we should probably try it too.
Yeah,
I guess, right?
It's been good, but honestly, I like the Old Carolina better.
yeah, me too. Cherokee Purple was all right. It was all right. But some folks even mentioned some different types, like accidental crosses that had popped up in their garden, that they thought, well, this is a good tomato, and they saved it so it didn't have a name, or they had named it or whatever it might be. And that was kind of cool that people had that to share too. That's kind of a fun thing about tomatoes.
Yeah, because there's a small chance that the tomatoes could cross-pollinate depending on how close they are or the different varieties that they may be.
Well, sure. So cross-pollination between tomato varieties is quite rare. So if we think about a tomato flower, the anther cone in the very center, that's the pollen shedding portion of the flower. And then the pollen receptive pistil is protected down inside of that cone. So the likelihood of cross-pollination in that scenario is very slim. But in some varieties, especially old tomatoes varieties, you'll see where the pistil actually peeks through the anther cone and it's more exposed. And that makes it more vulnerable to the likelihood of cross-pollination happening, accidental hybridization happening in the tomatoes. So in that case, crossing can happen, you know what I mean? So you'd recommend maybe like a physical isolation between varieties of for tomatoes that maybe like 20 feet. We
have a couple really cool YouTube videos. We call them the tomato tours, where you can kind of see the tomatoes we're growing, how we plant them. What kind of other information?
All sorts of different stuff. So it's kind of a highlight of all the different varieties that we happen to be growing. And then I'll probably tell, there's some stories or some history or something for each one that I share. And then we talk about the different leaf colors, and we talk about some determinate versus indeterminate, like we talked about today. It's just all sorts of different fun stuff, really just showcasing all the diversity of tomatoes, really just digging into look at all these different things that we could be growing, and we're so excited about it type of thing. So yeah, I'll put a link for that if folks want to check those out down in the show notes, because it's just fun to see all the different tomatoes and stuff, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, so speaking of growing tomatoes.
Yeah, so we wanted to get some information gathered up to help everybody grow tomatoes, and I thought, well, what we got to do here is we got to bring in an expert. We grow some tomatoes, but I want to talk to somebody that grew a lot of tomatoes. So we actually reached out to our friend Erica Kempter from Nature and Nurture Seeds, who you might remember. She was on an episode last season, or perhaps the season before that. We actually had her on with Mike. They own Nature and Nurture Seeds together, and we did a little garden dating game with them back then, and that was a ton of fun. So obviously, you can check that episode out if you want to. But we brought Erica back. She owns, like I said, Nature and Nurture Seeds, which is a Michigan seed company. So she's like our local seed farm. And so I thought, well, let's get her on, and she can help us through some of the common challenges that we might experience when we're out in the garden. So one of the first things I wanted to talk to her about was blossom end rot. This seems to be a very common challenge. We struggled with a little bit of it this year, which is very frustrating. But even when you get on social media and people are struggling in their gardens with their tomatoes, blossom end rot seems to be the most common challenge that everybody's facing. So I wanted to see what Erica had to say about that, maybe what causes that, what we can do to avoid it.
Blossom end rot is typically caused from calcium deficiency. And on our farm, we grow a lot. I grow like 600 tomato plants. We use something called Revita Pro, which is a fertilizer that is kind of low numbers. It's not a really high nutrient, so it has calcium in it. So I just make sure I apply enough of that. And if I need to apply extra midsummer, I can do that. If I had an immediate problem that was pretty significant, I would spray my tomatoes with a kelp spray or a seaweed spray with some sort of soap to make sure it sticks to the leaves and absorbs well into the plants.
So she said some really interesting things here. So one, she's utilizing a fertilizer that's high in calcium. So the blossom end rot is brought upon by a lack of calcium. And so she's countering that by making sure there's additional calcium in the soil, right? So she's fertilizing the soil when she's putting the plants in. But then in the second half of what she shared with me, she's talking about using a topical spray on the tomato plants to put calcium into them. If they're struggling from blossom end rot, like if it's happening now, her solution is a kelp seaweed-based liquid spray that she sprays on the plants. And when the foliar spray, when you spray on the leaves of the plants, they absorb it into the plant. And it's a really good way to get nutrients into plants sometimes. So what she's doing here is like I said, it's a kelp spray. So it's a seaweed-based spray. So there's a lot of different nutrients that you're adding, but it's calcium in particular that she's looking for. Now, it's also important to note that blossom end rot can be caused not just from a lack of calcium in the soil, but the plant's inability to absorb the calcium that exists. If there's calcium in the soil, but the plant can't absorb it, it doesn't matter how much calcium is there, right? And that could be caused by infrequent watering. If we allow this plant to dry out dramatically and the water it heavy and let it dry out and that sort of thing, it kills the little, you can consider them like little hairs that are along the root systems that actually specifically work to absorb the calcium and nutrients. And if we damage those hairs, then it's unable to absorb the calcium that exists. So the solution there, of course, is more even watering, not letting your plants dry out so dramatically.
And we experienced this blossom end rot the most with our tomato plants that were in big pots.
They are the only tomato plants that we had blossom end rot with.
And that makes the most sense that we experience them from that because, a pot dries out so much faster and it doesn't hold the moisture the same way.
Next thing I wanted to talk to Erica about too was trellising tomatoes. This could be a sticky point for some folks. Sometimes it's just difficult to understand how to trellis your tomatoes or why to trellis your tomatoes, which for the most part is to get them up off the ground. These sprawling vines are going to do much better for us if we can get them up off the ground. So I want to talk to her a little bit about trellising to see if she had any tips for us.
We do what's called the Florida basket weave. So we put our posts every 4 feet to weave the twine around the tomatoes. And then I wrap it like 3 times around each post and then around the tomatoes. And so I'll go down one whole row on one side, go back on the other side, and it's like sandwiching it between the twine. And I do that once a week for about a month and a half, like June and July, and a little bit in August. And then I'm kind of done.
We love the Florida weave, and actually it's kind of hard to visualize what she's saying, through description, but we do have a couple cool videos on YouTube that you can see this process.
Yeah, and replicate it, because it's actually very simple. It may sound kind of complicated, I suppose, but it is very simple. Once you see it and you do it a couple of times, it's not bad. And I have found it to be the most effective way. And of course, it works well for Erica because she's growing 600 plants. So it's on a large scale. So for us, when we're growing in large rows, it's very, very nice. But we've also done it in a raised bed that's only got like 6 plants in it, 2 rows of 3, and we'll put posts on either end of the bed and do it that way, like a mini weave. And that works pretty nice. But if you're just growing like 1 plant or 2 plants, individual plants, I literally just take a large, like 8-foot stake, stick it into the ground next to that tomato plant, and then just tie the plant onto it as it grows, just to hold it up in the air. And that seems to work pretty good.
And a lot of people like to use tomato cages. And as long as you're using a very large tomato cage, then that can work. But you'll find that some of those tomato cages you buy just commercially are a lot smaller than they should be. And so the tomato becomes a little more condensed and contained and can't breathe as well. And so it just
flops over the top.
Right.
Yeah. Those tomato cages work really well for pepper plants. They could probably just call them pepper cages because they help hold the peppers up once they're, weighted down by all the fruits or something. But a big tomato cage is also going to work nice for a determinate tomato. Right, that has that set height, so the tomato cage will work nice for that. But an indeterminate tomato, we need to look into these other methods, such as the Florida weave that Erica described. Then I had to ask her about harvesting tomatoes. If you talk to folks and you ask around, everybody seems to have a different philosophy on when to harvest a tomato. I like to harvest it at first blush. As soon as that fruit starts to change color, I get it off that plant. I get it in the house. It protects it from predators, from little, gophers or whatever that want to munch on them, get them out of there. And I like to do that. But then some folks will say, oh, no, vine ripened is the way to go. You got to leave it on. So I was like, we got to talk to an expert about this. So this is what Erica had to say.
I go with a combination of a color change on the tomato as well as how soft it is. I'll notice a little bit of softening of the tomato, and that's usually what I primarily go on, kind of both of those. But first the color change, and then I'll squeeze it. It doesn't have a little softness, especially compared to other tomatoes on that same plant.
So this is an interesting thing because Erica tells me that she likes to leave the tomatoes on the plant until they are ripe. You know what I mean? Like she just described the change of color, but she wants to feel that give where you can feel it's not hard anymore, that tomato's got a little bit of give. And that would be the advice that I would give somebody for like a green when ripe tomato. When it's very visually difficult to see if the tomatoes are ripe, you want to wait till it's got a little bit of give to take it off the plant. That's totally what I said. But she's saying this for all tomatoes. She was telling me that she believes that once you remove the tomato from the plant, it can no longer receive any more additional sugars or anything like that from the plant. So the fruits that are left on the vine to ripen are going to be sweeter than those that are not. And that's very interesting. So I think that what we need to do is kind of put it to the test, right?
Yeah.
We should get a couple of tomatoes, leave some on, pick some early, and then have the taste test like that and see if we can see a difference in the different tomatoes.
And, we're so used to picking them so early because typically for many years the chickens are our biggest predators, and they would jump the fence to go harass the red tomatoes any chance they got. But now
I don't really blame them.
We don't have chickens right now, so it's not as big of a deal. But our grandma's been struggling with having the chipmunks and the squirrels come eat little bites out of every tomato if she doesn't pick them. So you never know what predator is going to get you. So I do love to pick them a little early and then just give them a day or two on the counter and they're good to go. But I'd be curious how much sweeter they might be.
I would like to put it to the test. Of course, picking a tomato early is better than having a tomato with the bite taken out of it. But I would like to try it just so we can see. Now, I couldn't let Erica go without asking her one last question, since we've all been talking about what is our favorite tomato and that sort of thing. I had to know, what is Erica's favorite tomato? And believe it or not, guess what? She could not tell me just what.
One of my absolute favorites is blush. I really like these kind of elongated or saladette types of tomatoes. One of my new favorites is Jewel, and it is one of my own. It's a pink striped cherry. So it's pink with golden stripes, and it's a cherry, and it just has fantastic flavor. So I'm really, really excited about that one. I've been breeding tomatoes for 20 years, and is my top favorite of all the ones that I have bred.
That's pretty awesome.
That sounds exciting.
Yeah, pretty cool. So both of those varieties that she mentioned are going to be available on her website at Nature Nurture Seeds. So I'm going to put that link down in the show notes so you guys can check that out. And that Jewel tomato that she's talking about, when this episode airs, those seeds might not be on the website just yet, but keep an eye out for them because it's brand new. And this is the only place in the whole world you'll be able to get your hands on this tomato. And it sounds like a really good one. And if she grows 600 tomatoes a year and she's been growing tomatoes for 20 plus years and this is her favorite, it's got to be pretty gosh darn good.
Yeah, cool. So one thing we didn't mention though in all this growing tomatoes talk was pruning, which is a pretty important aspect.
That's true. You're right. We didn't dig into that. But again, I know we've mentioned the YouTube a few times now, so I'll mention it one more time. We've got a video on there too about pruning tomatoes that's going to talk through opening it up for airflow, getting rid of the suckers, that sort of thing. And again, just like with the trellising, that's kind of a visual, might be easier to see to learn visually. So the YouTube's going to be a good choice for that.
All right. So we've grown the tomatoes. Now we have the tomatoes. What are we doing with these things?
We're eating them, baby. There's so many different things that we could do with these tomatoes. Of course, the best thing is just to eat them fresh, right? Like right in the garden, that first tomato, just eat it like an apple.
Yep.
Maybe you can bring it inside and put a little salt on it and share it with everybody, but not usually. The first one we're going to eat right away. But eating those tomatoes fresh is one of the best ways just to enjoy that flavor, all that hard work, all that time, that wonderful, wonderful tomato flavor. But we could turn them into like a fresh salsa. We can make a caprese salad. There's so many different ways to enjoy that fresh tomato without even cooking it, just enjoying it just the way that it is.
We love making BLTs, but something we've been really wanting to make, which is on our list to do any day now, is this Shakshuka.
Yeah, Shakshuka. So this is really fun. So I was just randomly, somebody mentioned it to me one time, like in passing. We were talking about ways that we make tomatoes, and I didn't really get a grip on what they were talking about, but the name stuck with me. And then I got this book. Chili Clove and Cardamom from Gary Nabhan. And he was just at the Seed Savers Conference, and it's his new book. And so it's a gastronomic journey into the fragrances and flavors of desert cuisines. And it's got a Shakshuka recipe in here as well. And so this is a dish originally from North Africa. And so it's kind of like stewed tomatoes and peppers. And then you crack eggs into it, and then you kind of like poach the eggs on the top of the tomatoes. And that sounds pretty awesome to me. So I've been pretty excited about wanting to try it. It's got all sorts of wonderful spices like coriander and all that sort of thing in it.
Ooh.
Yes, I know. And then just because of the way the universe works, now that I'm turned on to it, I'm seeing this recipe multiple places. We just got the latest issue of Homestead Kitchen magazine, and each issue of the magazine is all focused around one particular fruit or vegetable. And the latest issue is all about tomatoes, just like the episode today.
Yeah,
it's all about tomatoes.
Perfect time for that.
It's perfect time for that. And so I got the magazine because I've been writing a little column for the magazine about seed saving. So I got a little story in there about seed saving, how to save seeds from your tomatoes. And so we get the magazine, and it's got all these recipes in it. And there's Shakshuka in the magazine too. So
it's a really gorgeous magazine, so you should check it out if you're into that kind of thing.
But I mean, even just an old-fashioned like marinara sauce is a great way to work with a tomato, you know? When I was working on the book Heritage Pantry, we did a lot of different tomato stuff, and I share a tomato sauce recipe in there that kind of reminded me of my grandma's sauce that she would always make. So, you know, we've been obviously thinking about that a lot lately. And I think I'm going to put that recipe that's in the book, I'm just going to put it on the Patreon. So for all of you that are a member of our Patreon community, you can go find that recipe and check it out. If not, here's even more motivation to go check out the Patreon so you can get this delicious recipe and try it out with all of your homegrown tomatoes.
Because what's cool about the Heritage Pantry book is that it's a whole bunch of preservation techniques, and tomatoes, you can use lots of different techniques to preserve them. So canning being probably the most popular.
Oh, yeah, sure, right? Canning tomatoes. I mean, I've been canning tomatoes with my grandma. That's the story I tell in the book, you know. So, yeah, canning is an easy way to do it. But to me, I think that the challenge of canning, it would typically now needs to be pressure canned, right, because of the low acidity of the tomato. So that's an important thing to know. But it's just so hot. It's so hot, and it's like peak summer. It is already hot enough that it's hard for me to want to can in the summertime because it's like going inside in the house is a place to get away from the heat.
I always say it's like a labor of love. You know, you're like sweating in the kitchen, and I'm like, these tomatoes will be so good. Like as I'm stirring the pot of tomatoes. But
as long as you're not sweating in the tomatoes.
But actually, we found that if you have the freezer space, freezing either tomatoes whole, tomatoes cooked, tomatoes anyway, freezing them is a really easy way. Quick, fast, easy. Doesn't take so much sweat and, you know, work.
Yeah, it's nice. I mean, you could throw the whole tomatoes right into the freezer, and then in the winter when it's cold out and you need to heat your house anyways, dig them back out and cook them down and can them. And that's really, really nice. But we've made sauce out of the tomatoes. We'll cook them down a little bit and then put them in freezer bags, and you lay them out flat. So they're like thin, flat squares, and they stack so well. You keep them really well organized. You know, it's really nice. You have like a filing cabinet full of tomato sauces or whatever.
Yeah, different colors.
Sure. We also did in the book, we talked about sun-dried tomatoes. We're kind of digging into these old-fashioned preservation methods, and sun-drying tomatoes, you know, goes way back for sure. But it's a little more tricky for us to do here in Michigan because it's so humid in the summer. Unlike in Italy, where this technique is most well known, it's not as humid there. So they literally lay slices of tomatoes out on the roofs, and it's really easy to do. But we can't do that; too humid. So our alternative, of course, is to use the food dehydrator. And that works really well because once you take the moisture out of these tomatoes, when you dry them like that, it just concentrates all the flavors and the sugars of those little sun-dried tomatoes. Oh my gosh, they're so good.
So good. And actually, I made a big batch of them one year, and it lasted a couple years. So something fun to play with if you're looking for, you know, if you got especially an abundant amount of tomatoes and you don't know what to do with it, try that, you know, dehydrate them. And then I put them in an oil.
In olive oil.
In an olive oil, and then stuck them in the fridge. And then there was always, you know, I could put them in eggs. I could put them in sauces. I could use them in all sorts of ways. And they were just there ready at my disposal. So,
yeah, the oil works as a preservative there as well. In Italy, they call that sott'olio. You know, submerged in oil. It keeps it from being exposed to the air, which is another technique that we talk about in that book. So I tell you what, if you go to the Patreon, you want to check out the spaghetti sauce recipe, absolutely do that. But I'm going to put a link for the Heritage Pantry here too, because I mean, we've just touched on that a bunch of times. So it seems like it'd be pretty valuable for folks if they were interested in learning more about the preservation of the harvest for sure.
So you're preserving the tomatoes, and now is the perfect time to be also thinking about saving the seeds.
I think that goes hand in hand. Like when I'm saving seeds from tomatoes, you know, you got to squeeze the insides of the tomatoes out. You're squeezing all the juice and stuff out. And then you've just got like meaty handfuls of tomatoes. So it's like perfect for making sauce because you've already done half the work. You can make a nice thick sauce pretty quick because I've already squeezed all the juice out of it. You know, saving seeds more times than not is something that takes place in the kitchen. And the tomato is the perfect example of that, right? Because we're going to be harvesting the seeds from the ripe fruit. When the seeds are mature, it's the same stage of the tomato's life that we eat it. So we're bringing them into the kitchen. We're taking the seeds out of them. Now, seed saving is, for the most part, always very easy. You know, once you understand a few basic techniques and the sort of thing, anybody can save seeds, right? But tomatoes do have a couple of extra steps that are recommended, right? Specifically fermentation, right? The fermentation of tomato seeds. We need to break down the gelatinous coating that's around those tomato seeds. It's going to improve germination rates. It's going to help with seed-borne pathogens. It's going to be a great way to sort out immature seeds. You know, it's not mandatory.
No, many people have told us stories about just taking their tomatoes, squeezing them out on a newspaper or paper plate and letting them dry that way. And then in the spring, when you're ready to plant them, you literally just kind of tear off a piece of that newspaper and plant the whole thing. And then there's your tomato. Unfortunately, what they're missing there is that they're not getting out, some, like you said, some of the pathogens or the immature seed. So their germination rates may be a little lower that way. But it is possible and you can do it.
Oh, absolutely. You know, but I think that the extra steps of fermentation are worth the little bit of work that there is, you know, especially when we just talk about simple germination rates. You know, we're all very busy. There's a lot going on. You want to seed a whole flat and then only have half of those seeds come up just because you didn't take the time in the fall to do the extra steps?
Yeah, and actually the extra steps are so easy. You're literally just going to squeeze that tomato in a jar. We like to just add a little bit of water, stick it on my windowsill. Well, first I put some saran wrap over it, stick it on the windowsill, and let it sit for a couple days. And you can, once again, we have some really cool YouTube videos if you want to visually see how that goes down. Easy to do, easy to understand, easy to just add into the routine to help increase your germination rates later.
Sure. And I mean, it's also being a part of that cycle, you know, that I think is really important too. Again, when we save the seeds from our garden, those seeds are going to grow better for us every year. So if we find a tomato variety that we love, we need to save those seeds, right? Because then those future plants will perform better for us in our gardens, which means we get more awesome tomatoes, which is really, really good. But another thing that you're going to find, there are so many tomato varieties out there that seed companies can only carry so many varieties, and they like to do different stuff all the time to keep it novel. So if you find a variety that you like and you bought it from your local seed guy, you bought it from the big box store, whatever it might be, and then you don't save those seeds, next year that might not even be available anymore. They might have moved on to the next big thing and you're going to be out of luck. You know, so that just seems like a silly mistake when saving seeds can be so simple.
So can I save seeds from my, you know, from the farmer's market tomatoes or from the grocery store? Is that something I can do?
You absolutely can. You can save seeds from many of these things. Now, you're not going to necessarily know about the varieties that you're saving from the grocery store. You know what I mean? They might be F1 hybrids. They may not come back true to type. But getting seeds from your local farmer's market, you could talk to the farmer and they probably know the varieties that they're selling and they can tell you about it. Now, there may be that slight possibility that cross-pollination had happened and they might not come back true to type, but they're going to come back as tomatoes and they're going to be pretty awesome. Right. It's very rarely do I come across a homegrown tomato that is not fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah. So really what tomatoes mean to us is so much representation of summer. And so it's so nice to have them now and then to also be able to access them in the winter and some of these, you know, quieter, slower months.
Absolutely. So please just enjoy all the tomatoes that you can while they're in season. Get out there, eat them in every possible way. Try eating. If you have not ever just taken a whole tomato and just eaten it like an apple, try it. Just do it for me, please, for sure. And then put some up and save them. Whatever technique is going to work best for you. So in the wintertime, you could enjoy those flavors of summer. You could enjoy summer all year long. Well, here we are yet again at the end of another show. Big thanks to Heather for hanging out with us today. And thank you so much to Erica Kempter for being our tomato expert today. If you enjoy the podcast, remember you can always show your support by joining our community on Patreon. You can find a link to that and so much more at seedsandweedspodcast.com. This episode was edited and produced by all of us here at Small House Farm. And the music we're enjoying right now is Upbeat Summer by MFCC. I'm Bevan.
I'm Heather.
And we'll see you next time.
Happy growing.